How many of you like change? It seems like some people thrive on change, yet for other people, change almost paralyzes them. Change can also bring with it conflict. Today we will consider living through change and conflict. Genesis 1 through 5 reads, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And God said, 'Let there be light,' and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day." On the very first day, God changed things. He did not change, but everything else did. Now listen as I read Revelations 21:5a. "He, God, who was seated on the throne said, 'I am making everything new.' Then he said, 'Write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true.'" God again made everything new and changed things. Change will never cease. Why is it that we have difficulty dealing with something that has been around since the very beginning and will be around until the end of time? Often, where there is change, there is conflict. This session will attempt to lay out some basic rules using the Bible as the foundation for how to handle change and conflict. Let's consider a biblical case for change. John 2:1 through 11. Jesus changes water into wine. On the third day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." "Woman, why do you involve me?" Jesus replied. "My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used for the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." So they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet." They did so, and the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. Then he called the bridegroom aside and said, "Everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink, but you have saved the best till now." What Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was the first of the signs through which he revealed his glory, and his disciples believed him. Jesus' changing the water into wine had spiritual implication. Let's consider some principles from this passage. Seek God in his timing. Jesus was able to use the incidents to show a real need. While it was a physical need, the spiritual need was also there. Jesus most likely knew that the wine would run out, yet he let it. He did not rescue them before they were ready to see and hear what he had to say. As women leaders who see a need for change in a certain area, we must rely on God's provision for the change as well as his timing. Often we see the need for the change before the timing is actually right to follow through with it. God has a way of preparing his people, so allow him to lead you as you look for how he will bring it to fruition. Seek wise counsel. When it comes to change, we must get input from God, but also from wise counsel. Others who are more seasoned leaders should be consulted and heeded. God puts wise counsel there for us, and they have valuable insights that need to be considered. Set the direction. A vision tells where one is headed, and the strategy explains how one is going to get there. It takes a gifted person to see what needs to happen and what it should look like. The strategy used to get there can be even more challenging. Some know where they need to go, but have no idea what plans need to be put into place and how they should be implemented. Jesus already had a vision and a strategy that God had given him. God sent Jesus to die for the sins of the people by sacrificing his life on the cross. He also had to develop followers and send out the message of what God had in mind. Share the changes. Jesus not only used the water and the wine, he also used water pots as object lessons. Such items illustrated the Old and the New Covenant, the Holy Spirit's filling, the marriage and purity implied, and so forth. When the vision is shared during change, it needs to be shared in as many creative ways as possible. Jesus communicated his truth in who he was and what he did. The whole wedding banquet became the illustration of the abundance that he would provide. The disciples were empowered to learn and eventually, when the time was right, to lead the way. Choose the change. The wedding feast with the changing of the water into wine was just one of the many memories that would carry the disciples through the difficult times. The spiritual transformation process would make these disciples into the men that God wanted them to be. God would have to be allowed to do his work in each one. Each one would come to choose whether he would allow himself to be transformed. Continue to change. Jesus did not stop his mission once change started. He kept going. The disciples had to choose to continue in the change they had started. The definition of change implies a constant motion. Women must sell out and be transformed or change themselves before they can help others to be change agents and lead real change in the church. Transformation leadership is the process of transformation in the life of the believer and leader. Leadership involves numerous things, and transformation is just the starting point for real leadership development. Change is inevitable. Therefore, change should begin early and deliberately. The following might be considered. First, communicate the need for change. Jesus' mother communicated to Jesus the need for change. They were out of wine. Create the need for change. They needed change in order to accommodate the wedding party, and the water pots were available. Brainstorm with the team to ease the process. Jesus discussed with the servants a possibility for change. Celebrate change. After following Jesus' instructions, water was turned to wine, and the celebration was greater than before. From the beginning, conflict has existed. Conflict is a part of life, and effective leaders need to be able to deal with it. The book of Nehemiah gives us a clear picture of conflict and its resolution. They said to me, the survivors in the province who returned from the exile are in great trouble and disgrace. Jerusalem's walls has been broken down, and its gates have been burned down. When I heard these words, I sat down and wept. I mourned for a number of days, fasting and praying before God of heaven. Nehemiah 1:3-4. In this passage, we see 7 truths for dealing with conflict. Consider the problem. In Nehemiah 1:2-3, the leader analyzes the problem and looks at it from every possible angle. Have a compassionate heart. Nehemiah 1:4. Nehemiah's heart was heavy for the Jewish people. Consult God. Nehemiah 1:4-11. Nehemiah prays for the people. Continue to wait. Nehemiah 2:1-10. Leaders must be willing to wait on the timing before they jump into a situation. Timing can be a major factor in resolving conflict. Calculate the situation. Nehemiah 2:11-16. Investigating the full extent of the problem is crucial in leadership. call the team. Nehemiah 2:17 through 20. It is important that the team be informed. Continue construction. Nehemiah 2:17 through 20. Enlist people, continue building and construction. Give people ownership. Conflict is inevitable. Handling conflict is something that every leader needs to be able to do. God is always there with much more insight to the problem than the leader has and stands ready to give insight and His presence in the midst of difficult situations. Conflict with groups. Let's look at how we can take care of a conflict between established groups. Consider the problem. The two leaders should get together and hear each other out. A compassionate heart on the part of leadership is essential. Pray together. Calculate the situation. Look at every angle. Move to a conclusion to the conflict. And resolve the conflict. Resolution means that we put the conflict to rest. Conflict with individuals. Matthew 18:15 through 20 gives clear principles for handling conflict with individuals. If your brother sins against you, go and rebuke him in private. If he listens to you, you have won your brother. But if he won't listen, take one or two more with you, so that by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses, every fact may be established. If he pays no attention to them, tell the church. But if he doesn't pay attention, even to the church, let him be like an unbeliever and a tax collector to you. I assure you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will already be loosened in heaven. Again, I assure you, if 2 of you on earth agree about any matter that you pray for, it will be done for you by the Father in heaven. For where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, I am there among you. We go to the person with whom we have a conflict. If no resolution can be made, we take another believer with us to discuss the conflict with the one in conflict. If she refuses to bring resolve, we take the conflict before the church. If still no resolution can be made, then the one refusing resolution is to be treated as an unbeliever. Change and conflict can both be things that grow us and grow the women's leadership team. After it is all over, hopefully we have grown and know that somehow we have honored God in the way we handled everything.